Welcome to Living in Connection, where we explore the nature of physical and non-physical reality and what that means in your life.
Hello and welcome back. I'm Dirk Dunning and this is Frank DeMarco, and we're continuing our discussion on the Copernican shift kind of idea from 3D experience to much broader. And I think where we were headed was to talk about some applications maybe of communication or other things. What do you think?
Well, just for people who haven't seen the previous one, is a simple analogy, and it's only an analogy to what happened in astronomy, astrology too, when they ceased to think that the Earth was the center of the universe, and they started to think that the sun was the center of the universe. Of course, the sun's not the center of the universe at all, but it's closer than what we had. And the point is, we in 3D, moving from moment to moment in a very constricted, very closely defined way, tend to identify with the body and with the part of ourselves that we're familiar with in 3D space. And I'm saying, and I think we're both saying, that if we change it by analogy to the sun, that is our larger self being the center, and we in the 3D being a small tributary part of it, that changes things because it shows us we have way more possibilities than we ever thought we did. And it's also truer to life, you know. One thing we didn't mention, I don't think, in the last session was that the idea of each one of our ego selves being the center of our existence implies that everything is separate and everything is a whole bunch of individuals rattling around like marbles in the bottom of a pan. Whereas with the larger self, we're saying the sun is the center of our being. But as we know, the heliopause, which is all the area between the sun and shall we say, unknown outer space, that's way larger even than the sun per se. So we're talking possibilities here, and let's talk possibilities.
Let's do that. One brief pause that just for folks who are astronomers and that sort of thing, and compared to the lay public, heliosphere refers to the sun itself. Heliopause refers to the entire influenced environment out to the boundary shock that goes out way beyond the planets and the rest of the Oort cloud and whatnot. And so the comparison is between the local self and this great broader self that goes out beyond.
Yeah, good clarification. And I think of it as a bubble, you know. And in that sense, we're each a part of a bubble. Some of us may share the same bubble, I suppose, but it's a bubble, and beyond what's outside that bubble, we don't really know. At least I don't. You may. All right, let me ask your guys, or you want to proceed in a different way?
No, let's go whichever way.
All right. Well, let me ask your guys. They've obviously heard this discussion. They heard the previous discussion. What can you tell us, or what would you suggest that we do to help keep this as practical as possible, to show people a way to experience their larger self, their self as opposed to their ego self?
They're pulling me in about 5 directions at once. Pick one.
And please. if they want to give us something else, that's fine too. Whatever they want.
No, they're it's not a debate. One of the things about doing this is you get sometimes this odd experience of having many voices within the community of whatever this is that have not different priorities, but they're different focus, much like the discussion we're talking about what's your perspective. And so I think the one that they've settled on to start with is to think about communication in particular. So let's just let them say this. consider for communication that as you exist in the world, you have a tendency often to think in terms of your own self and what you are. And in that, we mean your conscious mind, or the thing that you experience as your conscious mind. You tend to neglect and forget the other aspects of self that you refer to as subconscious and unconscious and by all kinds of other names. At the same time, in focusing from the perspective of the I, as you experience the world, everything becomes a reaction about the I, about what's being done to you, what you are doing outside. And one of the things that you can do as you understand this is to step beyond that of saying, okay, I want to step now to experience it from my partner's perspective. I want to step now to experience it from this bum who's sitting on the side of the road's perspective. I want to experience it from that officer's perspective, or the dancer, or the chef at the local restaurant, or the driver in that car behind me that's been rushing to get somewhere and is crowding me, and feel what those connections are. In doing that, you open up to possibilities, not just for your own understanding, but to actually communicate in ways that you don't even realize that you have at your disposal, where you can reference, say, to the driver behind you of, hey, I really need more space. This is making me uncomfortable. And that interaction can occur in ways that you don't really have words for, where they can, if they are at the least open, experience it and end up changing their own actions and behavior and experience.
I think I would add that it happens way more often than we realize, but we don't realize it. And therefore, as far as we're concerned, it didn't happen until we suddenly realize all the ways that we are interconnected. Somebody some years ago had asked the guys upstairs for they wanted 5 rules for spiritual advancement or exercises. And the guys did give us 3, but one of those 3 was continually change your perspective. And they said it doesn't sound at first like that has anything to do with it, but in fact, you can see in the context that your guys just put out, that would be a very good way to do it, because it gets us out of the habit of thinking I am the be all and the end all.
Well, I'll tell a brief story. I'm not going to go far with this, but I had a trip that I was going back to the Monroe Institute, and it just happened I was at an airport, I think it was Chicago, and I'm having to change buildings that I'm in and all the rest of that. And as I did it, it was a heavy travel day. There's lots of people, and everybody was, well, not everybody. There was a huge anxiety because things were running late. There were all kinds of problems. And so as I reached this one escalator, I'm going up, and a gal stepped out of a side door, and I was just being my normal self, and I was happy, and everything was good. And she looked at me and says, "Aren't you worried you're going to miss your plane?" No, there'll always be another one. He said, "Well, that's a really great attitude." And as we reached the top of the escalator, I could see that energy permeate out across the space without anybody saying words to anybody. I could see the attitude shifting of people, of the energy that the two of us were putting out. And then she went on her way, and I'm leisurely making my way to the airplane. And by the time I finally get to there, turns out the same gal is the ticket agent who's taking the tickets. And she saw me and hearkened me over, and I showed her my ticket, and she said, "Great." And she put me onto the plane. And as it turned out, she put me onto the flight before my flight, and it was right on time for what my plane was supposed to be.
Oh, well,
everything worked.
This is a side issue, but I heard that you were thinking that, and that was well and good for you. But as soon as 2 or more were thinking it changed. And I go back, as I often do, to stuff that I've read in the Gospels, and Jesus says, whenever 2 or more are together, and there seems to be a tremendous multiplier effect. And I don't know whether it's merely that by sharing it, we get out of each other's or our own ego sense. I wouldn't be surprised that's a part of it. That's enough.
I'll take you one step further. Not just that experience, but others like it, is I have done things where I've wandered into a situation like that where people are stressed, and it happens. I look at the building and think, "My, you are a magnificent building. Look at you." And the 2 or more thing happens again. and the energy spreads across everybody there.
Now, does it? Or do you move to another reality that you've
I would love
resonated?
to know the answer to that
Yeah,
question.
yeah, I know. I'm just posing it. Obviously, I have the answers to all questions. So the trouble is, most of my answers may not be right. All right, so let's see if the guys have anything to say about this. We're really looking for something practical, we're really looking
Mhm.
for ways for people to think about things differently, I think, so that
Sure.
it will open up doors for them. So let's see. Come on, guys, you're on the chess clock, so we don't want to waste your time.
But while they're thinking about it, what I would extend is notice that in the story that I told, it didn't require action. It
No,
required just the opposite of action.
required being. Yep.
Exactly.
Well, the guys may be out to lunch. They may be having coffee, so we'll go on without
Well,
that.
ask them beyond communication. What are some of the other aspects we can use this for?
No, that's a good question. That's a good question. Starting with the very words beyond communication, you're on slippery slope because everything is communication in a way. We remember very well Rita asking us, what do you do on the other side? And we said, we relate. And that was the only thing we could think of to say. But they got the idea, not only Rita, but Frank and others, that by relating, we meant and mean we are separate and we are one, both, just as you are. And you don't think of the non-3D so much as doing, but it's more like being, and the being morphs. The entire thing morphs. We gave an analogy that Frank kind of liked to an LED display or some kind of a moving, changing lights, and they change continually. It was as if it was a computer, and every decision that it made changed the patterns of the lights. That's an intuitive way to think of the non-3D world. Well, it's that way in 3D too, except it's masked, of course. And you have to keep remembering 3D and non-3D are the same and different, not one or the other, but both. 3D is a slowed down, deliberately, it's made to seem, we can't go into this in any detail, but it's made to seem sequential. That's the only way you can experience 3D is sequentially. But that's a workaround in a sense. There is no such thing as sequentially. But we don't really want to go into that now. If you think about communication as communication between this one and this one, that's an entirely different way than thinking communication is between this part of myself and that part of myself. And there's a vastly different amount of potential energy and potential in the second way. And that's what we would recommend. If you think of communication as linking two things that were separate, you're going to have implied in there, and not very tacitly, the whole idea of separation, of differences. Whereas if you say there's this and there's that, and they're not usually aware of each other, and there are different parts of myself, and I'm not usually aware of this or that, that's an entirely different thing. In the first place, as you said earlier, it's not dependent on action. It's just dependent upon what you might call directed consciousness. But in the second place, it's way more powerful because there is no counterforce to it. If you're talking about connecting two things that are actually separate, there could be all kinds of things get in the way. But if you're talking about connecting two things mentally, is one way to put it, that are already a part of yourself, and it's just a matter of you becoming aware of it, what can separate that? The only thing that can separate it is your own lack of awareness, but that's under your control.
Well, and where this takes me is it goes into the Zen kind of ideas that are so hard for people to grasp about reaching without reaching. Where how can you actually reach, but not try to reach? Of being, not doing.
Well, that's a problem with language, being and
Right.
doing.
So a part of that is one of my favorites has to do with Hawaiian huna and an exercise or a practice they call ho'oponopono, and in particular one that I learned that's probably a variant of it about recognizing that everything in the world is a part of us and we are a part of it. We are one. And then in doing that, of going through a series of just a couple of steps of saying, I am so sorry. I have forgotten. I love you. Please forgive me. And in doing that, recognizing the oneness between, building that connection without reaching in order to have the communication that seems to be impossible.
You could look at it as a tacit choosing of love over fear. That is,
Yes.
of expansion and inclusion over separation and distance difference.
Yes.
But again, what's the takeaway for somebody who's not really sure what we're talking about and doesn't really know how to do it, Because you may not remember this, but to a lot of people, this is going to look like Cloud Cuckoo Land.
It does. It does. And that's what's so hard about it. It's the reason that Zen is so hard to grasp, is that when you are caught within the tangible, physical, local I, until you can actually release from that to a little degree to feel beyond that, it's hard. I think what I would recommend is the ideas that we started with in the last discussion about sitting quietly and imagine moving your consciousness around your own physical body or around the room in which you're at and experience things differently. That may sound bizarre, but it's an amazing experience when you can finally get there.
No, it doesn't sound bizarre to me. As you're saying that, I'm thinking a little more exploration in people's minds between being and doing will show them you can't be without doing. You can't do without being. It's really, as usual, language making differences look realer than they really are. And it's part of the territory. It can't be avoided. And of course, that's what Zen often tries to overcome. But what's the sound of one hand clapping? And somebody answered, well, how do you clap with one hand? He's presumably thrown out of the class. But
I finally heard the answer to that one.
Yes.
As a girlfriend slapped her boyfriend. Or vice versa.
Okay, well, we just subtracted from the sum total of human knowledge
exactly.
again.
but what did occur to me?
It's an important thing, the being and doing, that to realize I want to become better than myself. Is that wanting a being or is it a doing? The answer is yes.
Well, and another thought occurred to me, and actually it was prompted, is to let go of the thinking aspect for a moment. We get caught very much in the thinking aspect.
Yep.
And if you can choose to allow the thinking aspect to go away, so say you're in a contentious meeting, there's all kinds of things happening, and have some part of your mind pay attention to that. But step back, relax, and go into the feeling, not just of your own feelings, but the feelings of those around you and what they're experiencing.
As you did in the airport.
Mm-hmm. Feel what they feel. Choose to feel what they feel.
I can hear one part of this that might be problematical for some. It has an overtone of manipulation if people were to do it with the wrong intent. And intent is huge. With the right intent, it's nothing but positive. But with the wrong intent, it's like people seem to misuse neurolinguistic programming. It gives them an edge because they're manipulating somebody by knowing how to get beyond their reasoning ability and just have them unconsciously respond.
They know the glitches and the faults in how we work. Yes.
And it doesn't mean it's a bad technique, but anything can be used badly or well.
Well, go ahead.
Well, I've taken this for some years now as a almost axiomatic that if you go about something with a malign intent, you may or may not hurt somebody else, but you're definitely going to hurt your own access, and you're definitely going to hurt yourself, which is nice.
That's exactly where I was going to head, is that to a large degree, the kinds of things we were just talking about tend to be self-limiting. Not always, but they tend to be, because of exactly what you described, that in trying to do whatever the malign thing is, the person you first hurt is you.
There's a saying says, if you go to take revenge, dig two graves.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, it's also, regardless of malign, if you do it, like supposing you're doing it out of greed, okay, or whatever your motivation might be, that's all about me. Well, it's pointing you in exactly the wrong direction. That's a great way to lose whatever new abilities you're gaining.
Yep.
And again, I think that's a nice safety valve on the universe's part. Although, my God, you can see a lot of people misusing these things, and these for a long time they get away with it. But I think ultimately they learn better.
Well, we were talking about applications, and so I think this opens that next door of it ties into the fourth mode of prayer and all kinds of other variations on that same thing about doing intentions, and whether it's prayer or otherwise, where you can, when you correctly format how you're relating in this, you can interact in the world in truly amazing ways. If, on the other hand, you do it in a different way, you end up with things like, I want a new car. And you end up being granted the wanting of the new car
Yeah, you want all
forever,
your life.
but you
Exactly.
never get it. But when you can finally change internally and recognize how things actually work, magic can happen.
Part of that magic will be your redefinition of what's possible,
Yes.
and what the world is, and therefore what's worth pursuing and what isn't. And that doesn't look like anything, but I think that's the biggest magic.
Well, and also the hidden other side of it of, in prayer terms, they talk about it a lot, but also in all kinds of others of sometimes the best answer is not to be granted what you think you want in whatever form, that what's really to your greatest interest is something else entirely.
Although even there, sometimes sometimes you make the wrong decision and you get what you asked for, and you learn that it was not the smartest thing you ever did, and that may turn out to be for your advantage because ultimately you learn something and you grew from it.
Well, and
But
this kind of gets to be the backside of the front side that no matter which way it goes, there was always something to be gained.
that's the way I look at it. It's never a zero sum game.
Yes.
However, however, what shall we call it? Impatience. There is a thing where people begin wanting powers or abilities or whatever they may be, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe they do it. Maybe they pursue them from an absolutely altruistic place, and they do this for years and nothing happens, or they just feel like they just wasted their time. Oh, actually, that's just not much of a story. One of the lives that I seem to have encountered was a Zen priest. Well, he wasn't a Zen priest, but he was some Eastern priest, I think in Korea, and he spent his whole life in a monastery trying to learn what it was they were teaching. And when he died at about age 50 or so, he died really seriously devastated because he realized at the end they had lost the truth of what they were trying to teach. And so all of that effort was a waste of time. And of course, 2 seconds after he's dead, he realizes it was the effort that mattered, not the content. And so he hadn't wasted anything. He had gained
Mm-hmm.
from all that purity of intent. I hope that people will, if anybody's taking this seriously, I hope they'll realize you can't give something sincere intent and real effort and the universe doesn't cheat people.
Yes. And there's also the other ends of it that in doing this sort of thing, you find things that you didn't even know that you were looking for.
Well, sure.
Also, that if you can put yourself in this place where you are in a broader awareness, a lot of the manipulative things become absolutely transparent and obvious. You can feel the aggression in them, you can feel the misdirection, and they become huge flags and warnings about this is not the path you want to be involved with.
Yes, and other people's mistakes actually, if you learn to read them as mirrors, show you where you can go wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And seeing other people's reaction to yourself is one of the ways that you can begin to understand what's happening inside yourself that you don't even know is happening.
Yes. Yes. There was something that you said, and I wanted to respond to it, and I'm hoping somebody inside was paying attention, and maybe they weren't. I think my guys are on a coffee break actually, but It was something about intent. Well, it doesn't matter. Have we left out anything that's a practical approach for somebody who doesn't know whether or not what we're saying is true, but is willing to find out? Oh, I know what I was trying to say earlier. You said often you'll find stuff that you didn't even look for. Well, that's the nature of exploring. If you knew what you were going to find, you wouldn't be exploring. Exploration means I'm in unknown territory, at least it's unknown to me, so you can't possibly expect to know what you're going to find. And when you find something that you had no idea was there, I would take that as a good sign.
Well, and you ask what else there is, and I would suggest a couple of different things. Partly they're lessons from my father, partly they're lessons from others, and they're my own too, of learning to take the time at all times to look up, to know what's around you, to sense what's around you. You know, if you're walking to lunch, to see the dandelion growing in a crack that's just magnificent. Sure, you normally think of it as a weed, but if you actually look at it, it's a beautiful flower there, absolutely succeeding where nothing else does.
I would say that amounts to saying be present.
Be present. Always be present.
If you enjoyed this episode, please press like. Please press subscribe to stay informed of new episodes as they appear. We would love to hear from you in the comments section below, and we wish you the very best in connecting with your own guidance.